What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, July 24th, 2020. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. It's been a long week, very arduous time here, and I'm glad it's the weekend, although I got stuff I got to do over the weekend. But, you know, you have that sort of that mental image that somehow you're getting 2 days off, even though you're not really. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about today, and as usual, I'm going to do news until I run out of news, at which point we open the phone lines. And, of course, in hour number 2, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us with her unique perspective on the world. So Mike is in our control room, and let's get right on into it. Okay, over in Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot finally gave in and took down the Columbus statue in the dead of night. This was over the objections from the Italian-American community, and apparently protesters are still gathered at her home to demand she defund the police, and she now has her own personal security detail, apparently. So, anyway, critics blasted taking down the Columbus statue as bowing to violent nihilists, and Italian Americans branded the whole thing a betrayal. Now, you can't please everybody, so why should you even try, right? And let's see. Okay, the Yankees and the Nationals had the season opener game, and they knelt in unison before the first game of the season, just days after Trump said the game was over for him if players took a knee. So the Yankees and the Nationals knelt in unison before the first game of the season while the anthem was playing. And I think this has gone on far enough. I'm at the point right now where if anybody does that, I'm not big into watching sports. I'll be very honest about that. I don't watch a lot of sports. I sort of lost my taste for spectator sports all the way back in high school when I was a photographer for the yearbook in the newspaper, and I got tackled. So I sort of stay away from those things now. Anyway, out in Washington State, the Redskins have announced their new name, and boy, they're so creative and clever out there in Washington State. They've renamed their team the Washington Football Team, hoping to avoid any kind of controversy. Well, you're already in trouble because George Washington owned over 130 slaves himself. Now, he freed most of them in his will, but still, in all, you watch, somebody's going to make a big stink about Washington, both the team name and the state name. And I'm still waiting for somebody to say that we got to take Lincoln off those pennies here. Okay, Michael Cohen has been freed by the judge after just 2 weeks, who says jailing him again was retaliatory to stop the tell-all book revealing Donald Trump's race slurs. So the judge ordered the release from prison of Michael Cohen. I think it happened today at 2 o'clock Eastern time. So Michael Cohen is a free man right now, and I'm sure he's happy about that. The real big judicial bombshell, though, a judge has ordered the release of a multitude of documents in a lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell, including the infamous Epstein flight logs. Now, Maxwell was arrested at her New Hampshire address at the start of the month by federal agents. She's currently being held in prison, charged with multiple sex trafficking and sexual assault offenses, along with 2 counts of perjury. It's alleged that not only did she provide underage girls for Jeffrey Epstein to assault and rape, but she participated in the abuse herself. Maxwell wanted these documents kept secret, and the judge said no, they're going to be made public in the coming weeks. And those flight logs are going to be very, very, very interesting indeed here. Okay, Representative Louis Gohmert, Texas, has introduced a resolution yesterday to ban the Democratic Party or any other political party that supported slavery. And it's kind of ironic to see the liberal Democrats out there saying, oh, well, it's the Republicans who are trying to keep the black man down, and it's the Republicans who want to return to days of slavery, when it was the Democratic Party that supported the KKK. Woodrow Wilson was a big supporter of the KKK. And those Southern Democrats had grown rich on the slave economy, and they didn't want to let it go. So now here we are in 2020, and the Democrats are trying to act like, you know, they're completely innocent in all this. And they're going back and saying, well, this Republican founding father had slaves, and that Republican founding father had slaves, and they all had slaves, and they're all bad people. But Lou Gohmert is out there saying, got to ban the Democratic Party, or at least rename them. Suppose they could rename themselves the Liberal Party. It would be stating the obvious, but anyway. Okay, let's talk about COVID-19. Okay, U.S. coronavirus cases, we are told, surpassed 4 million, and another 1 million are expected in just 2 weeks. And again, we really can't know if these numbers are accurate or not because of how many false positives there are out there and the incentivizations to attribute deaths to coronavirus, even when other factors are at play there. So the numbers are not reliable. Apparently down in Palm Beach, a gunshot to head and a death from Parkinson's disease were incorrectly attributed to COVID-19. So it's overinflating the death counts. And it's probably one of the reasons why Florida seems to be having a huge surge right now. Florida's Governor DeSantis calls for an investigation into why people are testing positive for coronavirus tests they never received. So after learning that waves of people who were never even tested for the COVID-19 virus received mysterious positive results, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis decided to call for an investigation to get to the bottom of it. And he really should. Now, I'm convinced there's a real virus out there. It's making people sick, and some people who have compromised immune systems are dying, or they have other health issues as well. But it's certainly not as deadly as the seasonal flu. In fact, so far this year, when you're talking about the younger demographics, more young people and kids have died from the seasonal flu than from COVID-19. But they're fanning it up. They're making a big deal about it for some reason. The other day, I was talking about how strict American Airlines was on the wearing of masks during the flight. But apparently there was this woman who refused to wear a mask and was kicked off the plane before it left the gate, and the entire plane applauded and cheered. So anyway, Donald Trump has canceled his Jacksonville convention, and he puts his own coronation as candidate online with tele-rallies for supporters, admitting Florida's virus spike means it's not the time. I think he's still going to have some form of a convention for the delegates up in South Carolina, but for the most part, it's going to be virtual, and the Democrats have now announced their convention is going to be completely virtual as well. They'll be able to hide how many people are showing up, or more to the point, not showing up here. Donald Trump is admitting all schools cannot reopen and only will when districts decide it's safe, but says federal cash should go direct to parents to let them homeschool or go private. I think that's a very, very good idea. You know, if there's one silver lining to this COVID-19 cloud, it's that more and more parents are getting involved in homeschooling and getting involved in their children's education. And I imagine they're getting a few surprises as to what the current curriculum is teaching our kids. Common Core. All right, I talked about this yesterday, and I want to mention it again. We're seeing all these stories about how plea deals are being made, indictments are coming, Durham's got the goods, and my response to that is, sure. Yeah, okay, because we've seen this pattern before. You know, they're always coming out there saying, it's going to work. The system is going to take care of itself. Just sit back, relax, don't do anything, let the professionals handle the situation. And then nothing ever happens. Okay? There's another article over here, this one from Daily Caller, saying that one is supposed to believe that Attorney General William Barr is in charge of the Department of Justice, and that on May 14th, 2019, he appointed John Durham, the U.S. Attorney in Connecticut, to conduct the inquiry to examine the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation and determine if intelligence collection involving the Trump campaign was lawful and appropriate. Okay? To date, there's nothing to show. And I think this is more dog and pony. The system does not attack itself. All righty, there's something going on over in Fort Hood. And by the way, Fort Hood is one of the forts that will be renamed if this bill to rename the Confederate forts named for Confederate heroes goes through. But apparently 3 soldiers have been found dead near Fort Hood in just 1 month. Apparently last Friday, Private Mejor Morta, 26 years old, was found outside the base in the vicinity of Stillhouse Hollow Lake, a reservoir that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers operates. Now, officials haven't suggested that foul play was involved, and the Bell County Sheriff's Department is currently investigating the incident. But that's a lot of, because these are young men. They're in good physical shape because they're going through, the basic training and the exercises and everything. The Army does have doctors that keep an eye on these people. So what's going on over there? And I notice they're sort of hemming and hawing about what the cause of death is. I mean, if he fell off a cliff, they just say, misstep, fell off a cliff, hit his head on a rock or something. But we've had 3 of these now, and they're very hush-hush about what's going on. Is it a rash of suicides? We know that suicides are a big problem in all branches of the military. Or is there some kind of a drug ring operating on the military base, and it wouldn't be the first time. And these 3 ran afoul of it. All right, turning to the international news, Israel's list of compromised officials suggests their guilt of war crimes. Now, what this is going on, the International Criminal Court has adjourned without issuing its ruling on whether Israeli officials will be tried for war crimes against the Palestinian people. Since 2014, when Gaza was destroyed during Operation Protective Edge. With an extended time frame until a ruling is due, Israel now has additional time to prepare for any eventual action taken by The Hague. And apparently it's already drawn up a list of officials who might be liable to be prosecuted for war crimes. They're making a list and telling these people stay inside Israel. Because if The Hague says, yeah, you can be charged with war crimes, you can be arrested pretty much anywhere on earth in any country that's a signatory to the ICC. Now, yesterday we were talking about some stories about how the ADL is out there trying to encourage their supporters to find some way to justify what Israel's been doing to Palestine, in particularly the issue of collective punishment, which is a war crime under international law. But apparently, according to Haaretz, this list contains the names of 200 to 300 Israeli officials, most probably including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Benny Gantz. The list has been drawn up in secrecy, not least because, as Haaretz pointed out, the court is likely to view a list of names as an official Israeli admission of guilt. An admission of these officials' involvement in the incidents under investigation. The existence of the list alone is likely to be viewed as such. Okay, yeah, here's where we're talking about the ADL. The ADL appears to recognize that annexation would violate Palestinians' basic human rights, enforcing a codified regime of nationality-based discrimination subjugation. In other words, racism, apartheid. And that, as a group ostensibly concerned with civil rights, this is in tension with its stated values. Now, this leaked ADL memo says the ADL needs to find a way to defend Israel from criticism without alienating other civil rights organizations, elected officials of color, and Black Lives Matter activists. Israel will be painted as akin to an ethno-nationalist country which continues to oppress and subjugate Palestinians. Hopes to avoid appearing openly hostile to public criticism of annexation while working to block anti-Israel legislation. That's what they hope to do. Good luck. I think most people have opened their eyes and realized that, Israel certainly says one thing and does something completely different here. Well, one of the things that we can look forward to is the end of all of these Holocaust court trials. They're running out of surviving Nazis. And a little bit of good news here. There was this 93-year-old man, Bruno Day. He was handed a 2-year suspended sentence after being convicted as an accessory to 5,230 murders. The way Israel has approached this, and Germany's gone along with it, was you could be doing any job at these slave labor camps, and they're going to, find you guilty of being an accessory to everybody they claim died there, whether they died of disease or cholera or typhoid fever or were executed for trying to escape or something like that. And apparently he was tried in juvenile court because at the time that he was working at this as a tower guard in the Stutthof camp near Gdansk in Poland, he was only 17 years old. So they tried him as a juvenile, and they gave him a 2-year suspended sentence. He's 93 years old, and his lawyer basically said, this is a good thing. He would not survive in prison for very long. I mean, 93, that's a good run. That's a good run. All right, well, down in Houston, there's a big question mark hanging over the Chinese consulate because the head of the consulate won't commit to closing the office, which was supposed to happen today. And this is defiance to the State Department's demand. Now, Kai Wei, the Chinese consul general in Houston, said China is protesting the closure order. His office will remain open until further notice. Meanwhile, in a little bit of tit for tat, China has retaliated against the United States by directing that one of the American embassies in Guangzhou, I think it is going to be closed. So a lot of provocations going on. Article that came on out of the Wall Street Journal. The U.S. is positioning military assets around Asia to counter China, according to Defense Secretary Mark Esper. What's China doing? China's not sending their ships over to the Eastern Pacific. They're not, rattling their sabers. The aggression is all on the side of the United States. Look at the war pattern for the last 2 decades and look at who's doing the invading and the threatening and the blustering and the bluffing. And it's not these other countries. It's the United States, which our government has wrecked this country, and they're thinking a war is going to sort everything out because, if they can get a good war going, then the American people will forget all about the high taxation and the repressive policies of this government. They'll throw the flag a snappy salute and toss their money and their children's lives into whatever defense zone they come up with next, which could be China. It does feel like they want a major war somewhere, anywhere at this point. It's going to be the Russians. The Russians didn't bite. Now it's China. China apparently is easier to provoke. But it does look like they think a war is going to solve everything. And that's a repeating pattern. The last 2 times the United States got the economy this badly messed up, they got into a world war to get out of it. Crash of 1907, get into World War I. Crash of 1929, get into World War II. Crash of 2008, and here we are, pointing our weapons at everybody here. Now, Mike Pompeo was out there warning Americans what China is doing to the world, saying we can never go back to the past. There's a lot of China bashing going on. In fact, I was watching Josh Gates has a new show on Wednesday nights, and even in some of their stuff, they're out there, bad China, China's doing bad things here. Anyway, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called on leaders around the world to unite against the Chinese Communist Party, warning that if the free world doesn't change that, Communist China will certainly change us. Boy, does that sound familiar. That's what we were being told back in the 1950s when the Cold War with Russia. We had to watch out for the commies. The commies were coming. They were going to give us socialized medicine. They were going to do all kinds of terrible things like, equal wages for everybody. And, that was just not the American way. Now, Pompeo is trying to apply the Syria, Iran, Venezuela model to China, and he's calling for a people's uprising in communist China, which means they're already sending in agent provocateurs to try and kick off some rioting in the streets. Okay? Given the Chinese culture and the Chinese people's inherent obedience to authority, I don't think it's going to work, but it is going to anger Beijing. They're going to get really ticked off. Okay, do you remember a while ago when Turkey sort of went its own way and the U.S. canceled a contract to provide them with F-35 and supports? Well, apparently the U.S. Air Force is going to buy back the Turkish F-35. We're going to take a break for commercial. We'll be right back after these few words. Welcome back to our show here, and a reminder, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724 2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. We really need your help. And again, a huge thanks to those who've already donated. Okay, so apparently we're sending more troops to Europe, specifically Norway. The U.S. Marine Corps is going to be sending more troops up there, and according to Norwegian Defense Minister Frank Bakke-Jensen, the U.S. presence in the country will be made more dynamic. Instead of maintaining a force of 700 in the country, the U.S. presence will soar during drills and diminish in peacetime. Like that's going to happen anytime soon here. Major Adrian Rankin Galloway at the U.S. Marine Corps Forces European Command has assured Norway that despite the restructuring of the U.S. Marine Corps, which may have consequences for the Allies' defensive capabilities, the U.S. still promises to fully support Norway and meet its obligations. Who's putting Norway into play? All right. Rankin Galloway told the newspaper Claus Kampen, we will continue to develop our strong security cooperation with Norway. He added that American participation in Norwegian exercises will increase, while the continuous presence will be made more dynamic. Okay, Erdogan is talking tough again, and he's saying that the Turkish invasion of Syria will end when people are free. Oh, that's always the carrot they dangle out there. Go along with the wars. You're going to be free. They're going to be free. Everybody's going to be free. You know, it's easy to make people free. Just leave them alone. Just stop messing around with their lives. This has got nothing to do with freedom. The United States has invaded something like 30 different countries since the end of World War II. And I'm guessing at that number, it may be more. And always we are told we're bringing American democracy to this country. We're freeing these people from an evil tyrant. And the reality is we haven't actually produced a working democracy in any of these countries we've gone into. We impose dictators trained at the School of the Americas. The Shah of Iran, for example. Pinochet. Ferdinand Marcos. Who basically exploit their country. Batista in Cuba. Exploit their country for the benefit of American corporations. Now, right now, NATO seems to be at the helm of European foreign policy. NATO defense ministers gathered by video conference on June 17th and 18th and made a series of decisions to strengthen the alliance's deterrence. However, nobody in Italy talks about it, neither the media nor the political world, where an absolute multi-partisan silence reigns all over this. Yet these decisions, basically dictated by Washington and signed by Minister Guerini for Italy, not only trace the guidelines of our military policy, but also our foreign policy. First of all, announced the Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, NATO is preparing for a possible second wave of COVID-19, against which NATO has already mobilized over 500,000 soldiers in Europe. What are they going to do? Shoot the virus? Stoltenberg does not clarify how NATO can predict a possible second virus pandemic with a new lockdown. So COVID-19 is now becoming an excuse for more wars. Okay, let's talk about the economic news here. Silver begins a big upside rally. So if you invested in some silver coins, huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. The world is looking at going back to a gold standard as the US dollar continues its collapse. Now, the Baltic Dry Index sinks to a one-month low as global rebound hopes fade. The Baltic Dry Index is losing steam following an impressive upswing from May's lows. The BDI began tumbling in August of 2019 with an extension to the downside following the virus pandemic. The BDI is an index of the Capesize, Panamax, and Supramax time charter averages used by investors as a proxy for shipping conditions or world trade. According to Reuters, BDI touched one-month lows on Tuesday, weighed down by declining rates for Capesize and Panamax vessels. Now, what the Baltic Dry Index is measuring is the shipment of raw materials. If you own a store and you've got good customers and they bought all of your toasters, you need to order new toasters. So you call the manufacturer and you say, I need more of these toasters. The manufacturer then calls up the company that provides the raw materials and says, I need more raw materials. And the raw materials being moved from their source to the factories, that's what the Baltic Dry Index measures. And so if the Baltic Dry Index is low, it means manufacturing is slowing down. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin says Republicans want to replace the $600 a week unemployment boost by giving the jobless 70% of whatever their old wages were in a new coronavirus bailout plan. And says this will be a replacement as part of the fourth economic stimulus bill responding to the coronavirus crisis. Okay, let's talk about the Three Gorges Dam. China is now admitting that, yes, it has moved slightly. And they're saying it happened just last weekend, a week ago, ignoring all the prior reports that said something is going on down there. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. Welcome back to our show here. And I did make the comment before that I'm really not a big fan of spectator sports, and I just got an email correcting me on the fact that the team formerly known as the Washington Redskins plays out of Washington, D.C., not Washington State. My bad. And I wonder when somebody's going to say we have to change the name of our capital city because George Washington owned slaves. Because it really is getting that ridiculous. It's turning into a reducto ad absurdum. Okay, anyway, we're talking about the Three Gorges Dam. It is really at its maximum capacity, and there's still huge flooding upstream. There's apparently a big surge of water coming down from all the way in Tibet, and the rain is just pouring down there. And now they're admitting that the Three Gorges Dam has deformed, but they're saying no big deal, nothing to worry about. And I certainly hope that's true, because if that dam was to collapse, we're looking at a 100-foot high wall of water traveling at about 100 miles an hour heading downstream, and in its path is Wuhan with the lab in there with all the viruses and whatnot, and this wave would reach all the way to the coast and city of Shanghai. It would be a huge humanitarian and economic disaster for China, and the economic effects would be felt around the world. China, on the other hand, is looking to the sky, and they just launched their Tianwen-1 on its journey to the Red Planet. And it's due to arrive on the Red Planet next February after a 7-month, 34-million-mile voyage. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open the phone lines now. And we're going to talk a little bit about computers. Apparently, there's a new, what's called a shadow attack, and it can replace content in digitally signed PDF files. So apparently 15 out of 28 desktop PDF viewer applications are vulnerable to a new attack that lets malicious threat actors modify the content of digitally signed PDF documents. That's always been one of the big problems about working over the internet. How do you get a signature? How do you get, there's no such thing as a digital notary. But apparently the list of vulnerable applications includes Adobe Acrobat Pro, Adobe Acrobat Reader, Perfect PDF, Foxit Reader, PDF Element, and others, according to new research published this week by academics from the Ruhr University Bochum in Germany. Okay, archaeologists and anthropologists are now saying that the first humans reached the New World and settled in Mexico 15,000 years earlier than previously thought. It was thought that humans came over from Siberia across the land bridge that formed during the last great ice age. But apparently they have found artifacts in Mexico dating 15,000 years earlier than that. And so it begs the question, how did they get over? Because the ice age hadn't really gotten going at that point. But it proves we're very resilient as a species. And it also proves that, prior to the invention of writing, which is maybe 8,000 years ago, we really don't know what the history of the human race has been. We're talking about humans and proto-humans living for 2 million years on this planet, and we don't know what they did. For all we know, there may have been advanced civilizations that got wiped out by the ice ages. Now, here's something that's a little bit interesting. Probably most of us have got this image of Neanderthals as big and huge and tough and strong. But it turns out they had a lower pain threshold than most modern day humans. And the 1 in 250 people who carry their genes today are still more sensitive. They have a pain threshold 7% lower than people without this mutated gene. And that's something that a lot of people are having some questions about, is the fact that the Neanderthals didn't really go extinct per se. They simply intermarried. And that a lot of their DNA is still in the human gene pool. Okay, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Ann Coulter is out on the warpath out there saying that Democrats are the parties of Antifa, is the party of Antifa. And she does seem to be right about that. And I have to wonder, what are the Democrats thinking? Because they're supporting all this violence, they're supporting the rioting, they're encouraging all this nonsense about, cancel culture. They're calling for statues to be torn down, monuments to be torn down. And it almost seems like they're trying to erase our history in order to replace it with something else, a mythological past that can be used to manipulate and control us. Because if we live in a world of illusions, those who control the illusions control us. Anyway. All righty, let's see what else we have in the news here. Apparently, 90 Chinese nuclear scientists have all resigned at the same time with no explanation. Well, I'm sure they have a pretty good reason. We just don't know what it is here. And here's kind of an interesting little story. A federal judge in Oregon yesterday afternoon issued a temporary restraining order prohibiting federal officers deployed in Portland from using physical force against news reporters and legal observers documenting the ongoing protests and riots in that city, which are still continuing even as I speak. However, just hours after the ruling, video emerged showing federal troops firing tear gas projectiles at and ultimately hitting a local journalist with the Oregon Public Broadcasting System who was recording the ongoing conflict here. Let's see, we have a caller on the line, Al in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, there's an old attack in town. It's called Windows 10 and Google Chrome and Google Search Engine. So all they're after is your loot. I remember you saying a couple of years ago with Windows 10 coming out, what they're going to try and do is they're going to try and use it as a pay-for service.
Yes.
And as these updates come out, and I'm like suffering through them and having to shut them off and actually renaming files in order to do this, I've come to realize that I think you're absolutely right, because a lot of things are changing in Windows 10 and the way it works. Whereas, like, I have Magic Jack, so when I use my phone, the microphone comes up in the taskbar as an app, right?
Yeah.
And then there's, like, in the task manager, I see a your phone, and it comes back every couple of weeks. I rename the folder to .back or .old, and then it comes back, and then I have to go back and delete it. Same with Cortana, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. If anybody wants to know how to shut off Cortana, it's so simple. You see it running in the task manager. You right-click on your taskbar, go to task manager. You see it running. Right-click on Cortana, and then go to where the file is. And you don't minimize your windows. You know what I mean, Mike? You make it like half of what your monitor would be. I can't remember what they call that. So basically, you have the task manager and that open up at the same time. And what you want to do is you want to rename that Cortana folder to .back or .old. And so you rename it, and then you immediately click on your task manager, right-click on Cortana, and end the task, and then go back and hit OK for renaming that folder. That's the only way to shut off Cortana, and it works until, of course, Windows 10 updates. And I haven't been able to figure out how to stop that.
Yeah.
Even though you know GP editor and whatnot.
One of the things I don't like about Microsoft is they've adopted the attitude that they know what their computer and you should be doing better than you do, which is definitely not the relationship we had with machines going back to the 1970s and 1980s. I've got one Windows 10 machine, which is stable, and because it's stable, I don't allow any updates. I've got that completely shut off, and it will nag me, about, you need the updates, I need the updates. But I've heard all these horror stories about the machines being bricked. And,
Yep.
I'm really thinking about turning this one particular box into a Linux box.
If it works for you, I would do that. But, as far as the updates bricking a computer, yeah, it's happened to me. And it was a horror show trying to get it back.
Yeah.
I didn't want to reformat because it took, you know how long it takes to do these things.
Yes.
Get the machine the way you want it, and then it goes bad. And that's including, Mike, using backup software. Or even like the Windows 7 backup where it would make an image file was good.
Yes.
It worked great. And like Windows 10, it doesn't work that great. It's almost like it's by design. They want to ram this stuff down our throat because it's tracking everything we do. And that's it.
Well, I think Windows
Right
10, Windows 10 is a horrible operating system. It's right up there with Vista and Millennium Edition.
Yep. But it has DirectX 12. Gamers love that.
Yes.
And I'm one of them. I'm not a big one, but, still. I like that DirectX 12. It makes everything look a lot nicer. It gives me a reason to spend a bunch of money on a stupid little graphics card that I really don't need, but I really want.
Yeah. Well, I don't spend a lot of time on games other than flight simulators, so, and I don't even have time to do that anymore.
Yeah, they're big on graphics as well. I appreciate your time, Mike. You have a good show. I'm going to be listening. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Frank in Pennsylvania. Hello, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, okay, Mike. Thank you so much for taking my call. I think I put 2 plus 2 together why 90 nuclear scientists resigned in China. That Three Gorges Dam. How many nuclear power plants are down from that dam if it breaks?
I don't know the exact count, but the whole point of having that dam in the first place is to have hydroelectric power rather than nuclear.
Well, I was just curious to find out how many are downriver from it, because I'll tell you, if that dam does burst, oh boy, it's going to be a disaster for the entire world. If there's nuclear power plants downriver from it, I'm not sure if there are, but I was just curious. 90 nuclear scientists resigning, in addition to that dam is starting to crack a little bit or shift. Doesn't spell very good news, Mike. I just crossed my mind.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And like I said, the floodwaters are continuing to rise. That thing could, if it lets go, it is going to be probably the worst dam disaster in history.
Probably the worst, man-made disaster in the history of the human race. You're right. It is huge from what I've seen pictures of it. And the death toll is going to be, oh my God, it's going to be beyond count. And I was just curious. That's why I called this, the nuclear power plants. I know that they're moving away from nuclear, but I was just curious if they do have old nuclear power plants that are still online downriver from it. And those are going to be one of the first things that really is going to frighten the world, like what happened with Fukushima nearly 10 years ago. Well, I think it was over 10 years ago. I mean, it just will raise a hue and cry around the world. What would happen to population if there's like 2, 3, 4 nuclear power plants that get wiped out by this dam break? And that might be the reason why those 9 scientists left, or who knows? I'm just putting 2 plus 2 together. Your show is wonderful, Mike. You got a lot of good information out there, but it's just something that you should be thinking about. If there are nuclear power plants down from that dam, beware.
Okay,
right, Mike?
well, I'm looking at a map right now of where China's nuclear power plants are. They're located along the coastline because they're using ocean water to cool the same way that Fukushima did. And it doesn't look like there are a lot of them coming down from the Three Gorges Dam. And like I said, the Three Gorges Dam is, a major provider of hydroelectric power. I think it's in the top 10 of hydroelectric dams around the world.
Very good. Okay, Mike, thank you for the information and keep up the good work.
I will do my best here, and we're going to switch over to Miles in Maine. Hello, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael. Yeah, I was hoping maybe they could get to work in China and move in the Great Wall and make it a retaining wall for the three whatever the heck.
They may have to. They may have to. Unfortunately, I think it's on the wrong side, though.
Yeah. I was going to offer up maybe something that you might consider. I tried to call for like a half hour yesterday, and with an already shortened show, I don't think it's a benefit. I think we should have these show hosts that are calling in. They take up an unusual amount of time, and they have their own shows, and they call in their other shows. And you've got so many people that love to contribute to your show. And I just think we should maybe have a moratorium on any talk show host on this network calling in, because we've only got really the 1 hour for all the people that listen to this show. I mean, I know this is the number one. It's got to be the number one, the worst number two show. And everybody wants to get in here. And so there's so many that want to contribute. These talk show hosts, they have their own show. They get in on other shows like Stat Millers and the other ones. And I think they need to leave your show pure. So I was going to suggest that. And I was also going to say, maybe instead of an hour with the news, cut it back to maybe a half hour so we could get these callers in. Then
Well, what I do is,
I
like I said at the head of the show, I go until I run out of news. And sometimes it's a busy news day and there's a lot of stuff I can talk about. Other days, it's like a repeat of more of the same. I mean, you look at like Fox News, which I have up on the TV here. They're talking about COVID-19 hour after hour after hour, day after day after day. And I don't feel I can do that unless there's something new on the horizon. And sometimes finding enough material to fill 2 hours can be rather tricky.
Right. Well, a lot of the callers have also, they got such reference points that they cover a lot of this news, in concert with you. So they get it out there too, but you just have so many callers that want to contribute. Those were a couple. And then I had one more comment what I'd like to see. This is like my wish list, but I'd love to see maybe just the last half hour of one of your shows that you had Tom from Florida ride along as a shotgun as like a co-host, and let's hear what that would be like. And then you could have Dustin calling in, which, by the way, I don't know. I've been waiting to hear Dustin's sentiments on the vaccine, because if it's anything like the way he supports the mask, and Dustin gets a hold of something and it's the vaccine, he might be calling in next time as Dustina. So, I was wondering what his sentiments were with these vaccines, because they are dangerous as all get out, as are these masks, so very negative to your health. Do you know what his position is on the vaccine?
No, I don't, but I'm sure he's going to call in and tell us. Miles, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials and back with more phone calls. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the phones here to Joe in Tennessee. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing fine.
Since they're forcing us to wear masks now, I went out and I ordered a couple different masks. I got the Trump 2020 mask.
Good.
Keep America Great.
Yep.
Blue on one side is that, and the other side is the American flag. So when I wear that around, I get a lot of compliments. People want to know where I got it. And the other is a Confederate flag one, and that one I've gotten a few comments on also. I figure if they're going to use these authoritarian, rules on me, then I'm just going to rebel in my own way and throw it right back at them. They say, hey, that's you can't wear that mask. I say, hey, you're the one telling me to wear a mask, so what do you want? You just so anyway, I hope
people happy.
Yeah, it's just a good way to be rebellious against this kind of authoritarianism, and I kind of think that that's important to maintain, even though it might seem small. You'd be surprised how many people give me thumbs up or wink or say, "Hey, I like that mask," and it's kind of good to share that with other people, give it some form of camaraderie that you're not alone, because they try to make you alone. They try to isolate you, especially as white conservatives and populists. They trying to split us and isolate us, that's what communist Stalinists do. They did it to the kulaks. They demoralize you. So one guy with a pistol can tell you all to get on a railroad train when 10 of you could have just jumped the guy. Well, when you're demoralized, you're isolated. They can do that. They can manage you better like cattle. You know,
Yes.
so it's important to even a slight, simple forms of rebellion are actually very important, and it's very infuriating for the power structure when you do that. They understand it, whereas most people it seems petty, and they know, oh, what are you wasting your time? They don't seem to understand that it is a big threat to the powers that be when you rebel against them. You know, it's like that speech in the Ant's Life.
Yes.
Just stand up. But I wanted to talk yesterday. I had a caller, Glenn, who talked about the McCluskeys. And, I've been overseas, but I've kind of been somewhat aware of this stuff that goes on. But I think the McCluskeys are a complete setup. I think this whole thing is a false flag, basically. I mean, the McCluskey family, he's like some kind of a lefty trial lawyer. And the whole setup, them standing there with the guns, her gun doesn't even work. I mean, it's really, first of all, I don't believe in making heroes out of lefties, period, because him and his politics are the reasons why the left wing is in power, the reason why there are rioting going on, the reason why they don't crack down on it. So I would have liked to seen the group of vandals just grab him and roast him alive, because he's a lefty and he deserves to reap what he sows, so to speak.
We're getting into some of painting with a broad brush. There are lefties who are, real problem. There are some lefties who've got really good intentions, if not poor execution. Anyway, listen, we got to let you go. Take a break for our station identification. We'll be back with the Lady Claire after these few words. And welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And before we go to the lovely Lady Claire, we've got 2 other callers waiting on the line. So let's go to Ken in New York. Hello, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to tell you that you'd mentioned a Raspberry Pi several times. I went and dragged myself kicking and screaming and got a $10 Linux preloaded on a chip, and everything works. It's a 1.2 gig machine and it outperforms. I'd been using XP and I was crying because I had to leave it. And I do have a tablet that has Windows 10 on it, and like you, I won't let it update. It seems to be working okay. I just leave it alone. I only use it when I absolutely have to. Everything works on a Linux.
Yeah, it does. It's all open source, and we had one of our fans send in a list of absolutely free music software that will run on Linux. And I'm getting ready to overhaul Claire's music studio because she's getting back into writing and composing and the rest of it. So we're going to hot rod her music studio, and we're probably going to put a Linux box in there with a lot of this software on it. I was playing with one earlier today called MuseScore 3, and especially that you don't have to pay for it. It's well worth the money.
Yeah, I may have seen 1 or 2 of those. I saw some being offered, some music, so I may get one for myself. But I think Microsoft is finished, and I think their problem was when they got rid of the people that were turning into millionaires, and they started hiring $9 an hour engineers from where.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see the TV series Halt and Catch Fire?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Okay, because it was a TV series called Halt and Catch Fire, and it's a telling of the early days of the personal computer revolution, and a lot of it is rooted in how things really were back then, and so it's kind of interesting. I hope it comes back on. Anyway, the Raspberry Pis, I actually had 2 of them that got lost somewhere between Oahu and here, and yeah, they're Linux machines, and Linux works really good, and there's a lot of free software out there, and not just for music. And you have to sort of like get into that community, and then everybody say, oh yeah, you can get astronomy software over here, you can get renderers over here, and all kinds of animation tools, and you can build yourself a studio for the cost of the hardware alone.
And you don't seem to have to configure anything. I just hooked it up and recognized the IPs. I didn't have to set anything up. And I use Vivaldi because I liked opera until I understand the Chinese bought them out recently. But the Vivaldi is like the Scandinavian people that originally wrote opera, and boy, does it zoom. I did my banking. I'm slowly working myself over to it. put everything on it and find apps that are compatible with it. And one of the things I like is DOSBox, which fortunately exists for several platforms, so I can keep my old stuff working. It's really, and I paid like $30 for it. It was a bargain.
Yeah. I mean, some of the earlier Raspberry Pis you can get on eBay for like $20-$30. And, the top of the line Raspberry Pi 4, with 8 gigs of RAM is going for just over $100. It's just amazing. And what's really cool is at those price breaks, if one machine is getting old, you can just copy your apps over to the new machine, move the little micro SD card over with the operating system, and bang, you're up and running again. I'm trying to figure out, can I gang these together into a rendering farm?
My computers were fun when they were all Commodores. I mentioned in the past that I still have them all, and I have spare parts for them. But this stuff with Windows, after XP, I'm finished with it. It's still mildly usable, and all of your certificates are expiring. And you would think somebody would want to start a business rewriting certificates for these old operating systems, but nobody seems to be interested in it.
No, the business models get you to buy everything all over again every 5 years. Well, the Raspberry Pi, to me, that brought back how much fun it was playing with computers when they first came out. And I was a big Commodore user myself. I had a VIC-20, then I had a Commodore 64, then I got into the Amigas, and I was in those for a lot of years.
I have a B series, is one of the last ones that I have, and I used to be a dealer for MSD. I have the IEEE drives, a pair of them. That was back in the early 80s. Memories.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Oh, the good old days when computers were fun. All right, Ken, I'm going to let you go here because we got one more caller, and then I want to turn the microphone over to the Lady Claire. Terry in California, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike, I have more news and less callers, and limit Tom's time to just to the same thing everybody else gets. And my question is, do you know about Israel destroying a Palestinian COVID testing station?
I heard about that.
And it's very convenient to have all those Palestinians die from COVID, to have it spread throughout the whole community. And that way you won't be accused of, violence and, using tactics to get rid of your, the people that you're oppressing.
It's still a form of collective punishment, and it's still a war crime.
Right. The other thing I wanted to mention is my daughter lives in Los Angeles, and she had a burglary next door. And these two minority youths, about 20 years old, were running down the street with a pillowcase full of silver and stuff from the house. And the guy came home, and he started running after him. And they called the police. And this policeman they know that works in the neighborhood came over, and they told him, and he says, well, we got new word from Garcetti that we're not to arrest anybody or prosecute anybody that's not committing a violent crime. So property crime is, hands off of that, and they're not even going to acknowledge it. So that's what's going on, and since that word got out, then the crime rate's going up. People.
Imagine my shock.
Yeah, other neighborhoods are coming in now, and they got a free rein. And if you jump on them and do bodily harm, then you're the criminal, and you can be prosecuted for a violent crime. So things are backwards, like David Icke says, they're upside down,
Yeah, they really are.
So, okay, Mike, it's time for me to go and for Claire to come on. So
it certainly is here. Thank you for the phone call. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire. And Lady Claire, what's the first thing you want to talk about today?
Well, the first thing I want to talk about is just the degree of nastiness and intellectual dishonesty we're seeing coming from Congress all at the same time. This comes to us from Zero Hedge. Apparently, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez dropped the F-bomb on the House floor after refusing to accept apology over an insult. Now, this whole thing started on Monday when Republican Congressman Ted Yoho reportedly called AOC disgusting and out of her freaking mind after she asserted that the riots and looting across America was because of poverty and unemployment. Now, here is how she is characterizing looters. Maybe this has to do with the fact that people aren't paying their rent and they're scared to pay their rent, and so they go out and they need to feed their children and they don't have money, so they feel like either a need to shoplift some bread or go hungry. Well, apparently Yoho got ballistic and committed an even worse sin by strongly swearing at her in a very gender-specific manner at the New York congressperson. Now, Yoho apologized on Wednesday for the, as he put it, I think this is amazingly, ridiculous, abrupt nature of the conversation, but neither admitted nor denied the profanity. And he said, having been married for 45 years with two daughters, I'm very cognizant of my language. Offensive name-calling words attributed to me by the press were never spoken to my colleague, and if they were construed that way, I apologize for the misunderstanding. Now, folks, I'm about to vomit here. Excuse me. How AOC is characterizing the protesters is horrific, and that she does not seem to see the difference between a peaceful protest and looting or stealing. There's a logic chip that is missing here. But the Republican congressman with a long-term marriage and two girls is just as repugnant in his response. Now, when people have a hungry family, the first thing they should do is they should call every church they can turn their tongue to and find out who's got the food bank, who's got food to feed those children and get the immediate situation taken care of. But looting, stealing, that's about.
I mean, you're not going to be able to eat a Nike sneaker or a 4K television set.
No, you can't. You're going to fence it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you're going to take it home, you're going to put it on the wall and say, hey, I got 4K TV.
Yeah.
Aren't my Nikes cool?
Right. I mean, that she cannot seem to distinguish between looting, legitimate protest, and legitimate need. I think we have some logic processes that are more than a little messed up here.
That's kind of Alexandria's way, which is why sometimes we refer to as Alexandria occasionally has a cortex.
Yes. Okay. There's another article here, Cold Wars and Profit. Now, this comes to us from Craig Murray via consortiumnews.com. If you've never gone to this site, you might want to try it. I think you're going to find some responsible, sober reporting, sober blogging. And the way this starts is, if an asteroid runs into the Earth, any surviving press will blame it on Russia.
Yes,
okay,
or
Russia
China.
bad. Yeah. Now, a couple of days ago, The Guardian of all blogs carried a very bizarre piece, which has since been removed under the heading, Stamps Celebrating Ukrainian Resistance in Pictures. Now, the first image that they show is a stamp bearing the name of Ukrainian Insurgent Army, UPA. Now, this organization was responsible, and there's no doubt about this, for the slaughter of at least 200,000 Polish civilians. They liquidated whole Polish communities in Volhynia and Galicia, including women and children. Now, the current Polish government, which is as anti-Russian and pro-NATO as they come, has declared this a genocide. And the article goes on to talk about seizing local opportunities to exterminate rural populations and seize their land and assets, be they Polish, Jewish, or Gypsy. But any kind of balance with a reasonable person would have to conclude that the UPA was a terrible phenomenon. And there's no more defense about this than a display of Nazi art with no context. In fact, The Guardian's very brief text was still worse than no context. And they talk about a Ukrainian photographer collecting 20th century stamps issued by Ukrainian groups in exile during the Soviet era. Artists and exiles around the world would use the stamps to communicate the horrors of Soviet oppression. And the article writer said these stamps show us the ideas and values of these people, who they really were and what they were fighting for. No, they do not. The powers that be want to blame Russia and China for everything going wrong, but have utterly zero evidence of them doing what they're being accused of. And Mike, the one thing I'm hoping for, especially as we come into this election season, is that we have more people intellectually awake about the degree to which the United States government constantly lies to its citizens, constantly. And I don't know how you feel about this, but my awakening as a political adult happened right at the time of Vietnam, because a lot of kids, young men who were drafted, A, didn't come back.
Yes.
Or B, didn't come back all in one piece. And I would like to hope that that would be something that people are going to think about. Because, as you mentioned, I feel that we are being pushed into a war before the election. That is something that President Trump wants to see happen. And unfortunately, unless we quietly, peacefully, and responsibly fight this thing, we're going to be at war by November 3rd, which is the election day this year.
Yeah, it does feel like we're being rushed forward into a war before the election can happen. And, you know, do the Republicans think it's going to help Trump? Do the Democrats think a new war is going to work against Trump? I think everybody's kind of guessing on that.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I am old enough to remember when the Pentagon Papers came on out and basically said, yeah, the government had been lying to us all along. They knew they couldn't win in Vietnam, but nobody wanted to be the person who stood up and said, we have to quit.
Yeah. Yeah. Very painful watching. What is that line? Those who do not understand from history are doomed to repeat it.
Yes.
We're there. Okay, very interesting development. Major Hollywood studio orders AI-driven face mask detection robot. Oh, golly gee. Thank you, Lord, that I'm an independent and I work at home. According to RID, ROSA is an AI-driven security system, including both human and vehicle detection, license plate cognition, and complete integration with the RAD software suite notification and response library. Now, the guy who founded this company, Steve Reinhardt, said ROSA records violators and repeat offenders of those who fail to wear the masks. And the ability to record violators, and particularly repeat violators, gives high-profile end users such as this one options for enforcement and general security. It's great to see this first order specifically come for this technology within a very short period of time from when we announced it. And as ROSA gains popularity in Hollywood, a much wider release of the wall robot is expected, due mostly because half of the country is now under mask requirement orders as virus cases and death soar. So, Mike, what's next here? Making sure bathroom breaks aren't too long? Following people who have a habit of not towing the corporate line? What happens to a serial offender here? Will they get written off of all companies' potential hire lists? The possibilities for abuse of this system are absolutely endless, and does not bode well for people who are in any way, shape, or form mavericks at work.
Okay.
This was a very concerning article that I read. Apparently, 75% of adults say social media companies wield too much power and influence over politics. Now, this was from Pew Research. And their research, their questionnaire, found that 72% of American adults think that this is true, that social media companies wield way too much power and influence over politics. And in the age, Mike, of deplatforming and demonetizing people who use social media, and their message might be different or controversial. I don't blame people who hold this kind of an opinion, because I do too.
Absolutely. I mean, I was
yeah.
raised in a world where freedom of speech meant exactly that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, when the internet was originally designed, it was all peer-to-peer, and there was no way to control the content.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, these large companies like Google and Facebook get set up, and everybody starts sending all their traffic through what are essentially these choke points.
Yep.
And the choke points are now being used to filter what we're saying. And I think that if somebody could document the business relationship between Facebook and Google and so forth, and the U.S. government itself, it would be a clear violation of the First Amendment.
Yeah. Well, they have become sort of the government's fourth arm, if you will, of surveillance.
Yeah, well, not just surveillance, but control of what we're saying.
Yeah.
It's very, very Orwellian.
Yes. Oh, there was a wonderful T-shirt I saw a couple of weeks ago on one of the blogs. It said, "Make Orwell fiction again." I like that.
I like that one too here. Okay, we're coming up here on a commercial break, and we'll be back with more of the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. Welcome back to our show here, and lovely Lady Claire, what's the next story you have for us?
Well, the next story is very fascinating to me, and its title is "The COVID Panic is a Lesson in Using Statistics to Get Your Way in Politics." Now, this is authored and comes to us from Ryan McMacken via the Mises Institute. And it talks about pundits and politicians being so obsessed with numbers, and numbers surrounding deaths and illnesses attributed to COVID-19. When the advocates for coerced lockdowns, business closures, and stay-at-home orders finally prevailed, a minority nonetheless did ask, what are the negative effects of these measures? Now, these people were thoroughly ignored. They didn't have continually updating, media-friendly, easy-to-access numbers on their side. In fact, the numbers that illustrated the dark side of lockdowns and stay-at-home orders only began to trickle out without any online ticker to announce every new case. Now, one of the things that medical doctors noticed starting in April, more severe cases of child abuse than before the lockdowns. And the lockdowns cut kids off from relatives and settings that offered any kind of an escape. And moreover, the likelihood of abuse increased as the lockdown put more financial and emotional stress on families. But did child abuse receive much media attention? Heck no. Child abuse victims have no dedicated website with a number that's posted daily at CNN or the Drudge Report. Now, there was a similar problem, Mike, with suicides and drug overdoses. Although there is much evidence that suicides, drug overdoses, and other deaths of despair have increased as a result of lockdowns, these threats to life and limb have received very little attention by politicians and media outlets looking to maximize fears over COVID-19. And again, suicides and drug overdoses have no daily death toll, which is featured so relentlessly in media stories. And another...
well, before you do this story here, we've got a caller waiting on the line.
Oh, okay.
W in Texas. Hello, W. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I guess my comment is what it's been pretty much the last couple of months. It's still hydroxychloroquine. Like, nothing's really changed. I'm just going to... I heard this lady, a doctor named Simone Gold. She had a thing she was talking about the other day, and I'll just read out the three main points was hydroxychloroquine has been approved by the FDA for 65 years. Number one. Number two, all pharmaceuticals have a safety profile. So every year, there's like every pill, if there's an injury or a death contributed to a pharmaceutical, is put into the pill's safety profile. And so for hydroxychloroquine, for the last 50 years, only 57 people have died in the last 50 years. Now, put that up against all these, Tylenol, Advil, all types of other pharmaceuticals where there's hundreds of thousands of deaths or injuries contributed to these pharmaceuticals every year. But for hydroxychloroquine, for the last 50 years, only 57 deaths. And the third thing she said was up until March 2020, was the first time you ever saw negative associations related to hydroxychloroquine up to March 2020. Before that, there were no peer-reviewed journal articles or anything like that discrediting hydroxychloroquine because it's been around so long. So it's pretty obvious. I mean, I said this months ago. It's pretty obvious what's happening. There's politics involved. There's business involved. There's agendas involved. And it's just really sick. It's just really sick seeing the psych mind control. I don't know how else to say it. Psych mind control over people, and the news is pandering to this, and so on and so forth. It's just really disgusting seeing this. I mean, check out this guy's Zelenko protocol. That's the guy that Trump referred to the first time he mentioned hydroxychloroquine was Dr. Zelenko. He has a website, the zelenkoprotocol.com. It explains how to use hydroxychloroquine with zinc, with azithromycin. You use it early. You use the correct dosage because a lot of these clinical trials have been using more dosage than you need. So check out the Zelenko protocol. And that's all I want to say.
Well, hydroxychloroquine, because it is such an old drug, it's been around for a long time, probably it's not patentable anymore. And what the pharmaceutical companies want to do is they want to invent a cure, or more, to be more accurate, a treatment that they will own exclusive marketing rights to, because that's where the big bucks are. And again, they want to sell a vaccine. They want something that people will keep coming back and getting year after year, like the flu shot. You know, there may be a yearly COVID-19 shot that we're going to all have to fork over our money for.
And I'll add this, $20. That's how much the whole protocol costs, $20, azithromycin, hydroxychloroquine, and zinc, $20. So obviously, it's pretty obvious what's happening here. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We got another commercial break coming up here, and then we'll be back to the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. Welcome back to our show here, and Lady Claire, take it away.
There was an article I noticed today that is of great concern, and its title was COVID-19 and the Pandemic of Surveillance. Now, this comes to us from someone by the name of J.D. Tuchie via Reason.com. Americans are increasingly monitored, and COVID-19 health concerns aren't really improving the situation. Now, the author of this says the nearest entry to him is in Prescott Valley, Arizona, where police department is among the hundreds that have partnered with Ring, the Amazon-owned doorbell camera company. You've seen the commercials, right? The Ring partnerships do not give police live feeds, but they can request video recordings regarding a specific time and area. While participating by Ring customers is at the moment voluntary, these partnerships are really clever to create a workaround for the development of a wholly new surveillance network without the kind of scrutiny that would happen if it was coming from the police or government. Now, this warning comes to us from Andrew Guthrie Ferguson, a professor at the University of the District of Columbia's David A. Clark School of Law, and author of The Rise of Big Data Policing. Now, researchers are finding, Mike, that there are very few crimes that are solved by these voluntary surveillance partnerships, but the home security marketing of the Ring arrangement is nudging the culture forward toward an easier acceptance of kind of a panopticon, if you will, outside the full range of civil liberty protections. And also easing the U.S. slide toward a full surveillance state is fear of the COVID-19 pandemic. Public health officials who just months ago fretted about overcoming privacy concerns with regard to contact tracing schemes have turned to government's usual solution, threaten harsh penalties for non-compliance. Mike, your thoughts on this?
Well, you know, it's absolutely right. We have seen the evolution of the surveillance state over the last couple of decades. And yeah, everybody's using COVID-19 to push their agenda. One of the agendas is we have to keep an eye on you at all times to keep you safe and healthy. And, you know, there are people who have a strong sense of privacy. They're not doing anything wrong, but they don't want somebody always watching over their shoulder, like we saw in 1984.
Yes.
And I mean, the government is admitting that a lot of this stuff really borders on the illegal, but you're absolutely right. They will impose harsh penalties if you don't go along with them. And that right there, that's tyranny and dictatorship.
Yeah. Another article very much talking about the climate in this country. The political climate is preventing 62% of Americans from sharing their political views. Now, this comes to us by Ivan Penchokov via the Epoch Times. And a growing number of Americans feel that the political climate is preventing them from sharing their views. Now, this survey was done by the Cato Institute. And apparently, Mike, Republicans are much more likely to be afraid to share their opinions than Democrats and independents. More than 3 in 4 Republicans, 77%, let me run back to that number, 77% are afraid to share their views, compared to 52% of the Democrats and 59% of the independents. The reluctance to share one's views appear to grow as respondents shift right on the political spectrum. Compared to 2017, the reluctance to share one's views increased across the political spectrum. Liberals, moderates, and conservatives were all 7% more likely to be afraid to express their opinions. The increase in reluctance was more pronounced among strong liberals, rising 12% to 42% compared to 2017. And I've got to tell you, it's kind of refreshing to be in a part of the country where one is not disparaged for being a centrist, and the word centrist is not a dirty word. I'm kind of liking that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're definitely in red country here.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but there's a warning implicit in this story, and that is not to confuse the silence of conservatives with acceptance or agreement.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so.
I think that's what Nixon referred to as the silent majority.
Yeah, yeah. There was another very interesting article by Judge Andrew Napolitano. We've all seen him on Fox News. And it's called How Totalitarianism Begins. And he talks about the insertion of federal agents into some of these hotspots like Portland. And no notice, no local consent, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security sent teams of agents who were, by the way, completely untrained in crowd control techniques and wearing military fatigues onto Portland's streets. Now, or they had maybe the word police on masking tape, and they descended upon the city in unmarked SUVs and began grabbing people indiscriminately off the streets without regard to the person's lawful presence or personal behavior. Now, there was an account of one guy walking peacefully in the downtown area, observing the chaos when 5 masked men in fatigues exited an unmarked SUV, grabbed him, pulled him into the car. They tied his hands with plastic behind his back. They pulled his cap over his face. They kept him for 2 hours and then released him. They filed no charges against him. And Mike, what Napolitano was getting to, this was a kidnapping. It wasn't an arrest. An arrest is a lawful restraint by legitimate government authority pursuant to a warrant issued by a judge. Now, Portland, last time I checked, is part of the United States of America, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to ask, and I agree with Judge Napolitano, what's going on here? It's very disconcerting. Now, on Monday, the DHS acknowledged that these guys, these thugs, were its police and said that their behavior somehow will bring stability to downtown Portland. And
I doubt that.
Yeah. The phrase used by acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf, mimicking his boss, said, law and order, law and order. But, Mike, there is nothing lawful or orderly about what these agents did. Their activities in Portland were unlawful, unconstitutional, and harmful. Now, they are unlawful because federal agents are selectively arresting folks.
Kidnapping.
Yeah, and not even pretending to be enforcing local or state laws. Now, under federal law, the feds may not deploy police or military domestically unless the state legislature or the state governor requests that. Now, that didn't happen.
No, quite
Portland.
the contrary. They're saying stay the heck out.
Yeah, or language a little more colorful. The Fed's activities are also unconstitutional because they are using government force to arrest people without probable cause or arrest warrants. We know that there is no legal basis for these arrests as they haven't charged a single individual. Moreover, this is so harmful and terrifying, being kidnapped, handcuffed, blindfolded, not spoken to, and then released, all for no stated purpose. And what this is going to do is have a mass chill on peaceful public dissent.
Yes.
You know, the First Amendment to the Constitution requires that the government protect speech, not assault those people who exercise it. And these indiscriminate beatings are intended to deter folks from publicly dissenting. It's profoundly unconstitutional, counterproductive, and will ultimately be costly to the federal government. Under the Constitution, the ability to regulate for health and safety belongs to the state and local governments, and the feds simply do not have lawful authority to fill in gaps in local law enforcement, no matter how offended they may be. And Napolitano says this is how fascism begins.
Totalitarianism begins. Okay, we have a caller waiting on the line.
Alrighty.
Tom in Florida, welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, good day, Mike. Good day, Claire. Hope you have a great weekend coming up. Yeah, what's on my mind is, Mike, what's going on with the Columbus statues and stuff in Chicago. It's mind-blowing to me what's happening. It's unrelenting, and the Black Lives Matter keeps getting away with their nonsensical stuff. But you know, last couple days, for the last 2 days, Mike, you've had this guy from Washington calling in your show talking about reparations.
Yes.
You know what? I got an idea for that guy. Why doesn't you give your check up and give them reparations? Because I don't think I should give them 1 cent. I wouldn't give them a darn penny, and I don't think they want $44 trillion. Some of these rappers are saying that the white man owns the black man, $44 trillion in reparations. We had nothing. Hey, the biggest slave traders in 1820s, the 1820s before the Civil War, were black men.
Yes.
They were the ones that owned the slaves mainly, a lot of these plantations. I mean, we're hearing this guy saying, I think it's about time. Reparations, nothing. No way, man. Are you kidding me? Are they going to give reparations to the white people or in South Africa? I mean, come on. Who's kidding who here? And the Irish were slaves here way before the blacks. Are they going to get reparations? Are all the Irish going to get reparations from England for the potato famine, which was a hoax, and killing over 5.5 million Irishmen and women? No. This guy sounds nonsensical talking about, we should give reparations. Reparations, nothing, man. We gave them enough. They got affirmative action. They get the best county jobs. They get the best federal government jobs. Who's kidding who here? No. I'm totally opposed to this nonsensical nincompoop stuff. And you hear this lying Biden, this lying sleepy, creepy Joe Biden getting away with the filth he's getting away with, calling Trump a racist president, when this guy's more racist than any president or vice president ever was in office, is Biden. He's a bumbling buffoonery. He's going to pick a black communist socialist Bolshevik as his running mate. I mean, Mike, some of your callers, man, it's unrelenting. They hate Trump so bad, it's pitiful. And Mike, I know a lot of police officers and firefighters. I play golf with them. Well, I haven't in a while, but they're all wonderful people. They put on their uniforms every morning. They love their wives. They love their or they love their husband. They love their family, and they have to think every day maybe they're not going to come back to their family. And we hear how bad cops are. All these federal officers are monsters. No, and you have them calling jack booted thugs and all that. And these people are supposed. Look, Mike, I knew this was going to happen a year ago if Trump wouldn't have went into these cities and arrested these governors and mayors for Sanctuary City. And look for how it's playing out now. Look what's playing out, because Trump wasn't getting tough back 2 years ago when he was doing the immigration with the wall. He literally had to build that wall by himself as far as getting the funds, because the Congress is holding him up. We have, 5,648 Americans murdered by illegal aliens in the last 3 years?
Yes.
Through DUIs, rape, murder. Mike, the crime rate with the Afro-American males against white females in this country is appalling. Have you ever looked at the FBI statistics and talked about them on your show?
Occasionally, from time to time, yes.
I wish you would update like every week on that. Like to give an update on the crime figures, black on white crime compared to white on black crime. It's alarming, Mike, what the blacks are getting away with, and they keep screaming this crap about slavery. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, over 750,000 total. That's only soldiers died in that Civil War. We're not even calling it civilian casualties, which I believe, Mike, was what, 3.5 million casualties in the Civil War?
Yes.
Is Mike correct on that? 3.5 million civilians? Women who had nothing to do with the Civil War dying left and right in the South, in the North, mainly in the South, not too much in the North. I mean, all we hear is what the white man is. The white man gave them everything, Mike. They got the best jobs in the country right now, for goodness sakes. Affirmative action.
It's easy for us. It's easy for people to sit here now and say slavery is wrong and slavery is bad, and I agree with them on that. But you need to hold one thought in mind. When you talk about this idea of reparations, when slavery was happening, it was the letter of the law. There was no crime actually being committed. And on that basis alone, the idea of reparations is ridiculous.
Thank you, Michael. You're right. I mean, some of your callers, man, they live in states, Mike, that they're never going to go vote Republican. Some of your states are totally blue for the next 100 years. So some of these guys that call from these blue states, I guess they're frustrated because when they go to vote, their vote doesn't even count. They have no opportunity to vote for a conservative agenda. If everything, they got to be with this licky, kissy, touchy, feely, bend over type situation in some of these blue states, and you got to take it for what it is, but you can't have a voice. Look at these New England states and look out west, Mike. Your vote doesn't even count. You know you're going to the polls with a defeatist purpose already that your vote won't even count. You have no say in the matter. It's still going to go Democrat, demon rat, whatever you want to, how you want to call it or propose it. And if we don't have some kind of a balance, we've totally lost this country.
Yes.
Our statues down, Confederate statues in Rotunda and the Capitol is disgraceful. And like I told you, Mike, the South never lost the war. If you look at it, they all went back to the South, and they had their southern states. The northern men went back to their states. The only thing the North did is had a bunch of carpetbaggers come down to the South and raped it, financially and economically and emotionally. What they did to the South was horrendous, the carpetbaggers. Why don't some of your callers study about the carpetbaggery of the South by the northern people, what they have done to the South with carpetbagging alone? Forget about and Mike, like I said, in the Civil War, for every man who died in that Civil War, the Yankees lost 2-1. The South took out 2 Yankee soldiers to 1 rebel, and they still lost the war. So what does that tell you? Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah, Lincoln, and people never talk about what Lincoln wanted to do after the Civil War if he'd have lived. If he'd have lived one more term, there's no telling what Lincoln would have done with the slave issue. My opinion, he would have sent as many as he possibly could back, as far as I read his papers, back to Africa.
Yes.
To tell the truth. They would have went back to Africa because even Lincoln's paper said, as long as I don't know how he actually expressed it, but the way he expressed it was really, it was a flowing type, situation where, hey, listen, we had a Civil War. It didn't work out the way everybody's hoping on both sides. And you know what? We got to repatriate them back to their homeland. And he tried to do that in Monrovia, Liberia.
Yes.
Some of your callers could study that, and then they could call in your show and say, "Oh, that guy Tom, he was basically right." I know I'm right because I studied it. That Lincoln, basically, if he'd have lived, he would not have allowed the country to turn out the way it did. Definitely not. And look at Ulysses S. Grant, Mike. They're tearing his statue down after what he sacrificed for the Northern armies to win, to have the slaves freed. He's a bad guy. I don't hear nobody wanting to tear Martin Luther King's statue down.
Okay, well, Tom, I got to put you on hold. We got to take a break for commercials. Okay. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program on this Powhana Friday. And Tom, I need you to kind of finish up here because Claire's got one more story she needs to fit in.
Okay, Mike, I'll make it real quick. I just want to say I really believe all these police officers throughout the United States, black, white, Hispanic, that do their job every day are wonderful people. 99.9% of these people, these police officers, these firefighters, they love this country, and they go out and do a heck of a job. And one more thing, Mike, I got to say this about Chauvin and Floyd. Now they're saying they arrested his wife, the Oriental lady, because of tax evasion, they owed over $500,000, $550,000 in taxes, Chauvin and his wife. I do believe that this is not a racial problem with Chauvin and Floyd. They knew each other in the club, and there was something going on, some kind of nefarious drug dealing or something was going on. Chauvin did not kill him because he's a black man. They knew each other. They worked in the same Mexican cantina, and I believe because Chauvin owed so much money for back taxes, and his wife, if you notice, Mike, right after he got arrested that day, his wife divorced him, and it probably wasn't because of Floyd. It was because of the money the IRS was coming after him for over $550,000. And nobody's talking about that. And nobody talks about Floyd. And Floyd had a bag of fentanyl on him that could kill 2,000, 3,000 men in that little bag that they had on video. And this guy was a porno star, Floyd. He did Floyd the landlord. Why don't people ever talk about that in the media? Come on, Mike. This is all a scam, junket to destroy our country.
Tom,
thank you, sir. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks. All right, same to you here. And I'm sorry, I'm probably not going to get to the other callers who were waiting on the line. You had one more story that you needed to jam in here.
Yes, I do. Apparently yesterday, U.S. fighters buzzed an Iranian airliner, causing injuries. And the pilot says jets were identified as Americans. Now, this is a civilian flight, guys. On Mahan Airlines, flight 1152, people were injured, some badly, when a pair of U.S. fighter jets approached it over Damascus, forcing the airliner to change direction to avoid colliding with the warplanes. Apparently, this abrupt change tossed passengers around, and several got injured. Now, the plane did land in Beirut after a stop-off, returned to Tehran without incident. There is no word on the condition of the injured. Now, reported earlier today, the U.S. interception was initially reported as a single Israeli airplane, which would have been the latest in a series of Israeli incidents against Iranians. The airliner pilot, however, said he contacted the jets in question and that they were Americans. Now, CENTCOM has confirmed this, saying they intercepted the airplane in accordance with international standards. What kind of is that? To ensure the safety of U.S. ground troops at the Al-Tanef base inside Syria.
In other words, they didn't know it was a passenger airliner.
Holy crud. Folks, what the flip is the U.S. doing inside Syria other than an absolutely unlawful grab of oil and territory? Mike, I would like your thoughts on this. How long do you think Vladimir Putin in Russia is going to allow this to continue?
Well, Russia's strategy is going to be one of attrition.
Okay.
They want to get the United States sucked into another Vietnam.
Yeah.
In fact, we're pretty much there in terms of both Afghanistan and Syria.
Yeah.
We're back in the same thing. We're not winning those wars.
No.
We're not able to win those wars, and we're being lied to. Yeah. All right, there's the music time for us to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of RBN. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. And we'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend. Aloha, America.